road trip. After 7 hours in a car, we'll be besties by the time we get there.
Look out!
It was supposed to be a simple road trip.
What's wrong? Are you hurt?
No bars! Don't you quit on me. Don't you give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. Don't you die. Don't you die. Why?
Stranded kids will face their worst nightmare. Figuring out how to survive offline.
Hashtag worst day ever.
To make it, they'll have to do the impossible. Communicate with the person in front of them.
How are you feeling?
Face to face. No devices.
Like this? Or this? Okay, good. We're getting somewhere. Look at that. It's 3 likes. We're with you. Is this ivy poisonous? I don't know.
Does this look bad?
I don't know.
Are these friendly?
Guys, I don't know anything. I just look stuff up on my phone.
You know, guys, I heard that if you stab your phone battery with a stick, it'll spark. Maybe we should try it.
No, not my phone.
It's not even working, Tegan. This is a matter of life or death.
Oh, it is. Because if anyone tries to stab my phone, I'll do worse than kill them. I'll unfriend them.
Whoa,
hey,
whoa, hey,
whoa,
no,
whoa,
you so not talk like that.
No signal, no hope.
A tweet!
Oh, right.
It's an actual bird.
Stupid birds.
Well, one thing's for sure, relationships are changing. You know, we use different verbiage. We use different ways of communicating. If you talk to kids today, you know, and you'll say, well, so-and-so dating, is this going, oh, they're just talking. I'm like, they're just talking. What does that mean? I could see they were talking. But, you know, when I was growing up, if you're just talking with someone, it meant there's no interest at all. Today, if you're talking with someone, there's predating interest. I'm like, all right, whatever that means. Things are changing in relationships. The verbiage we use, the way we communicate. I saw on somebody's Facebook page the other day, they had this posted, and it's about text messaging between a husband and a wife. Can we pull those up? Look at this. She sends a message. She says, I need an onion. He says, white or yellow? She says, I don't know, what's the difference? He said, one is yellow, the other is white. So they're even communicating in their marriage differently. He texts her at work. He says, can I put green apple hand soap in the dishwasher? And she says, don't do that. And he says, nothing. And she says, you did it, didn't you? And his response is, bubbles coming out of the dishwasher. Or, did you take the papers to the office? What papers? The papers I told you to take them by there 10 times last night. And he says, why are you yelling? Because if you're not familiar with texting, capital letters or on the computer is screaming. And she says, because you don't listen to me. This is ridiculous. I'll take them. He says, calm down. I'll take them. What papers exactly? So this whole communication, I love this last one. He says, Netflix isn't working. She responds, I know, I'm sitting right here. He says, I know, but I have a hard time verbally voicing my frustration. And so this continual tension takes place. And some of us will look at that and say, well, it's crazy, it's weird, it's messed up. But the reality is relationships are different today. They're changing. But one thing that has not changed, nor do I see it ever being able to change in relationships, is that it takes two parties desiring to be in that relationship and desiring to make it work and desiring to work on the relationship for it to happen. You know, the past couple weeks, we've looked at what the Bible teaches regarding the ways you and I can undermine a relationship or unity in a relationship, whether that's our marriage relationship and the unity there, or we could undermine the unity and the relationship in a church, or even in our workplace, in our neighborhood. It transcends all relationships. We can undermine it by looking at other people in maybe a downward way, looking down on other people. We can undermine it or destroy unity if we allow our fears of changes that are taking place around us to cause us to react in a negative way. We can undermine unity. We talked last week about the way that we use our mouth, the way that we say things, the way that we speak can destroy unity. And so this morning, as we wrap up this series on We Are One, I wanted to look at us restoring unity. And honestly, as I started out into this, I thought, you know what? The Bible teaches a lot about restoring unity in relationships. And it talks a lot about forgiveness and the need for us to forgive, the command for us to forgive, the example that Jesus set for us to forgive. But the more I studied and the more I worked on the sermon, shaped it, the more my focus changed, and I found myself looking at maybe a deeper reality. And it's a reality we're going to touch on today, and it's this. Sometimes in a relationship, you can't have unity, and the relationship ends. There are times that it does not matter what you do or how you do it, unity will not survive. So I want us to look at that today, and we're going to look in James chapter 4. We're going to look at something old and maybe a new light. But keep in mind, for relationship, for unity to work, it takes two. And in James chapter 4, I want to read these verses. We've studied these verses together. But I want us to go back and unpack them and look at them again. In chapter 4, verse 1, actually, it says, "So then," let me back up. He says, "What is causing the quarrels and fights among you? Don't they come from the evil desires at war within you? You want what you don't have, so you scheme and kill to get it. You're jealous of what others have, but you can't get it, so you fight and wage war to take it away from them. Yet you don't have what you want because you don't ask. You don't ask God for it. And even when you do ask, you don't get it because your motives are all wrong. You want only what will give you pleasure." And then he goes on to say, "You adulterers, don't you realize that friendship with the world makes you an enemy of God? I say it again, if you want to be a friend of the world, you make yourself an enemy of God." I want us to stop right there. If we look at the flow of truth that James has laid out here, and I just kind of need to preface this by saying that there are going to be parts of the sermon today that are PG-13, so FYI warning. You may need to cover the ears of someone sitting next to you. But I think if we don't deal with truth in a straightforward way, then we miss the opportunity for lives to change. James basically lays it out like this. He says, "My unmet desires cause fights and quarrels." My unmet desires cause fights and quarrels in life. Do you find that to be true? I see all around me that reality in life. Unmet desires equal fights and quarrels. Now, this would be a good place if you're going to cover somebody's ears. You may want to do that. How many people have ever argued in their marriage about sex? Don't raise your hand. Some people may be sitting here today going, "Oh boy, we're going to talk about this." Yeah, we are, because there are a lot of marriages today of younger people that are undermined by that very reality. The continual argument, the continual battle, the continual struggle, and it undermines their lives. And you may be sitting here today going, "Well, this doesn't apply to me." Do you know anybody else on this planet younger than you then it does apply to you, because it's destroying. Satan's using it as a weapon to destroy lives around us. The battle of physical intimacy in marriage, it's something that just plagues so many marriages today, because desires, wants, and needs aren't met, and so we fight about it. You know, one of God's greatest gifts in marriage becomes one of the points of greatest contention and division, and it shatters unity because of unmet desires. And God said, it doesn't matter whether, it's the male saying, well, my desire is this, this, and that, or whether it's the flip side of the coin where the lady's saying, you know what I really desire is I desire someone to spend time with me and someone to talk with me and then if you did that, I might feel more like. It's on both sides of the coin. Unmet desires cause fights and quarrels and battles that go on. James is right. But then the Bible goes on. It doesn't stop there. The truth says we don't have those desires met. Why? Because we don't ask. And I think there's some people, when we hear that, we go, well, gee, if only I had known that. I'm going to go home and I'm going to start praying about that today. God, you know what? Rabbits are here, and my husband's libido is somewhere beyond that. If you could notch that down to about here, that'd be awesome. Or there'll be some people that go home and they'll say, God, my wife and dear, they're kind of on like a once or twice a year program, and I would appreciate it if you could help her see a little bit more my desires, my wants, my concerns. And so we want to go to God and we want to say, fix the other person. And it may not even be about sex. It may be something else you're arguing about, that your desires, your wants are not being met. And I tell you what, in my life, when I stop and I look at the debates and disagreements and arguments that Kim and I have, and I look and I say, you know what, that's just a want or a desire. I am so upset about a want or a desire. Oh, honey, I think we need this new lawnmower. Well, we don't have the money for it. Oh, you always tell me no. It's my want and my desire that creates frustration. And that leads over to, God says here, he says, you don't have those desires, mate, because you don't ask. And we're like, okay, well, then if I got to ask, then that's what I'm going to do. God, give me this, give me that. But then he goes on, because God knows our hearts. He says, but the battle about what you want and you desire, you're praying about it now, but you're still not going to get it answered. Why? Because your motives are wrong. Well, why are my motives wrong? You just said pray about it if I have a problem. So now I'm praying about it, and you say wrong motives. How come my motives are wrong? You're only concerned about your pleasure. You're only concerned about your wants. You're only concerned about your desires. And the sad part is, for many Christians today, we stop at that and we go, what else is there to pray about? And we miss the whole point of prayer. And I wish we could go into that today, but we don't have enough time. That idea, God says, you're only praying about your pleasures, your wants, your desires. The word there used is hedonon. And it's where we get the word hedonism. It's the idea that you and I would live life guided by the principle that I will do what gives me pleasure or what feels good. And I will not do, flip side of that same coin, I will not do what does not give me pleasure. What I don't desire to do. It's a hedonistic life. And Scripture goes on as it talks about that here. It talks about how we live that hedonistic life. It's friendship with the world. There are some people today that are walking out on their marriage because of a hedonistic mindset in marriage that says, if I'm not happy, then I leave. It's not giving me pleasure. And I think it's time the church starts celebrating the people who have been through the trenches in life and who have fought hard in marriage. And by the grace of God, both people willingly have worked through the hard times. And they get on the other side. I think it's time the church starts saying, man, these people, God has done something incredible in their life, and we want to celebrate that with them. Because I tell you what, if that's your story, you know it was not an easy road. And it took both of you. And you know, as you battle ahead and you grow closer to God and you get through that mess in life, your story is probably not that different from many other people's story. And there are people that need to hear what God has done in your life, because that may very well save another marriage. It's your pleasures, your want, your hedonism, even among people who claim to be Christ followers. That's why we bail when the going gets tough. We stray from the straight and narrow. Because a people of the world, a people of the flesh, people who are friends with the world measure do's and don'ts by how it feels. Friend of the world. That word friend is phleos. Phleos. It's where, if you've been in church for any number of years, you've probably heard talk about different kinds of love. There's agape and there's phileo. And as we talk about the different kinds of love, God's love is an agape love. It's a volitional love. It's a love based on decision. There's not any emotion attached to it. It's when you stop and you help somebody, not because, oh, that poor person really needs it and they're just tugging at your heartstrings. You stop and you help somebody because that's just the right thing to do. No emotion, no strings attached. That's agape love, seeing a need and meeting a need. That's what God did for you and I. For God so loved the world. He saw a need in my life and in your life that he stepped out of eternity into time and space in Jesus Christ, put on human flesh because he saw a need and met a need that could only be met through his death, burial, and resurrection. That's agape love. But this phileo love, friends of the world, phileo love, it's brotherly love. But we use that term, and I, for the longest time, always thought that was like, hey, we're buds. Fist bump. Woohoo. But that word goes so much deeper, and that word carries so much more weight to it. Because it's a love that has a strong emotional connection. Phileo love is a love that's similar to a parent who would run into a burning building to save their child. You don't just do it because it's the right thing to do. You do it because there is a strong emotion inside welling up that says, I don't care what it costs. I'm going to do that because that matters. And it's that same phileo love with the world that causes a lot of Christians to say, I don't care what that costs, I'm going to do it anyways. Because I really think that matters. I don't care what it costs. If it costs me my marriage, I'm going to do that anyways. I don't care what it costs. If it costs me a relationship, a friendship in the church, I'm going to do that anyways because I want that. I don't care what it costs because I want that. And James is laying out here the reality when you and I begin to base our decisions in life based on how I feel and how it affects me and what I want, we are falling into the trap of being a friend of the world. Well, then how do I make decisions? Do I just mutter my way through life and hope I figure it out? No. Well, then why did God give me feelings and emotions? Because they matter. It's those feelings and emotions in marriage that draw us close together. It's the feelings and emotions in relationships that draw us close together. It's the feelings and emotions in raising children that keep you from ending their life prematurely when they don't listen. God gave us those feelings for a reason. But look, when we begin to base our decisions on life based on how it feels, then we've missed the mark and we've gotten off track. We've become a friend of the world. He talks about all these different things and how they play out in life. And here's what I want us to do. I want us to take it and flip it around today. And I want us to work our way backwards through this and say this. If I am a friend of God, if I am a phileos of God, then I'm an enemy of the world. Would that not be true? He just said if I'm a friend of the world, I'm an enemy of God. So let's flip that around. Let's work through this backwards. If I am a friend of God, then I'm an enemy of the world. Jesus said it. He said if the world hates you, or hated me, it's going to hate you too. If I'm a friend of God, what is a friend of God? James chapter 2, verse 23 says, Abraham believed God, and it was counted him as righteousness because of his faith. He was even called a friend of God. And if you go back and you look at the life of Abraham, friend of God doesn't mean he never messed up. He did some pretty dumb things. He said, yeah, honey, when we get here to Egypt, I want you to tell everybody you're my sister. Oh, yeah, sister. She's my sister. You want to marry my sister? Okay, go ahead. Go along with it. And he marries his wife off to Pharaoh. Just because he was a friend of God doesn't mean that he made all of the best decisions, but what it does mean, it says in this verse, that he believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness because of his faith. What made him a friend of God? It was his faith. It was the way that he lived life out. He lived life based not on how it felt, but based on how he felt towards God. God, I trust you. I know you wouldn't lead me astray. You want me to go where? Somewhere that you're not going to tell me about? Okay. You want me to do what? Sacrifice my son? Okay. You want me to? And he made all these decisions not based on his emotion. I cannot imagine the emotional turmoil as he raised his knife on that mountain, ready to sacrifice Isaac, his only son. But you see, he didn't live a hedonistic life where he made his decisions based on how it felt. He lived a life as a friend of God that made decisions on, this is what God said, and I believe him. James chapter 2, verse 14 says, what good is it, brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but you don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? We live the Christian life because of who we are, not to make God happy so we can go to heaven. We live the Christian life because we are so in love with God that we couldn't imagine doing anything that would hurt him or slight him or reflect poorly on him. And so because of that, we choose to lay our desires to the side and say, there's a higher agenda here. And it's your desires, God. So when I choose to be a friend of God and an enemy of the world, to live differently than the world, that doesn't mean we go outside the doors and we start attacking people, throw rocks at people who are golfing on Sunday, God forbid. That's not what enemy of the world means. It means we draw stark contrast, and we are going to live radically different than the rest of the world as a friend of God. He says, if we reverse engineer this and look at it, it says, when I'm a friend of God, then my prayer will be prayed with the right motives. I'm going to pray with the right. James chapter 5. James is all over this. Chapter 5, verse 16, he says, confess your sins to each other. Pray for each other so that you may be healed. The earnest prayer of a righteous person has great and powerful effect and produces wonderful results. So you see, when I live life in a close relationship with God, it's going to affect my prayer. Because I'm not going to start praying, God, change my spouse, God, change my kids, God, change my neighbor, God, change my work, God, change my... I'm going to start praying, God, change me. Because when I look at myself in the light of you, and when I begin to measure myself up to you, I see how truly messed up I am. And I may not be the only problem in my neighborhood. I may not be the only problem in my workplace. I may not be the only problem in my church or in my marriage, but I'm the only problem that I can work on. And I begin to pray with the right motives. God, change me because I'm messed up. We begin to pray God's will, and those prayers are answered. Why? Because we're praying exactly what God has wanted to do forever. To change me. To change you. And as God begins to change my wants and my desires, and it changes the way I pray, it changes the answers I begin to see. And it becomes a positive reflection on Him. You see, love of the world and love of God are mutually exclusive. They can't exist. We can't have both. You're going to love one and hate the other. You can't ride the fence. You can't stand with your feet in both worlds. They're too far apart. And yet we try. You know, I started this sermon thinking that there are times in life that if you and I do the right thing, and if we head the right direction, and if we, just pray the right prayers, that we can restore unity. We can always fix that unity. God can do the impossible. But as I prepped for this sermon, as I studied, and as I got deeper, I realized there are times in life that unity is impossible. That the relationship can't work. And I'm not talking about marriage, and I'm not talking about church, and I'm not talking about workplace, because all of that breaks down because of my wants, my desires. But I'm talking about our unity with the world. You see, it takes two for a relationship to work. And if we are to live in a phileo friendship with God, we live different than the rest of the world, and unity can't be reconciled. Romans chapter 12, verse 18 says, if it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. I read that verse and I thought, how interesting that Paul would write, or God through Paul would write to the Romans and say, if it's possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace. Meaning, there are times it may not be possible. There are times where we live in the world, but will not live of the world, and it cannot be rectified. You have to choose. Jesus said, if the world hates you, it hated him too. The flip side of that is, if the world loves you, if you're living the dream, if your desires, needs, and wants you're able to fulfill, maybe it's time to ask, whose dream am I living? Maybe the unity that I need to focus on restoring today is not unity with an estranged loved one, not unity in a workplace, not even unity in the church, but maybe the unity I need to focus on restoring is even more base than that. And it would be my unity with God that impacts every decision I make. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, I'd hope that our prayer and our goal and our drive in life would be that we would restore unity with you. And Father, it intended for us to pray today, or talk today, learn today about forgiving others, and really maybe the reality of what we need to seek today is forgiveness from you. You got to help us to realize there are times in life that it doesn't matter what we do, we cannot restore unity in a relationship where we are living fundamentally different. We can't live in unity with the world. But Father, help us to fall so passionately in love with you that we can't imagine living any other way than a way that brings you glory and honor. God, I pray that you would help us. Help us to live so unified with you that we would be the salt and the light that you created us to be. That we would be so much more than just nice people.